Look at the screen in your hand right now. Your thumb keeps scrolling, endlessly, aimlessly. Every few seconds, a short video pops up, flooding your brain with cheap hits of dopamine. You scroll to escape reality, lying to yourself with a few motivational quotes about discipline or focus. But wake up. It's all an illusion. Your discipline is incredibly fragile because it was bred in a world that is way too comfortable. 400 years ago, there were no fancy gyms and there were no soft healing philosophies. Out of the thick fog rising from the frozen ground of the Sengoku period, a man stands. Ragged clothes caked in trail dust, matted hair, bare feet dug deep into mud slicked with blood. In his hand, it's not the polished blade of a noble samurai. It's a rough, hastily carved piece of wood, Miyamoto Musashi. History remembers him as an invincible myth, the sword saint. But strip away the legend and the truth is much more brutal. Musashi wasn't born perfect. He was a child of domestic abuse, cast out into the deep woods by his own father. No clan to back him, no formal dojo, his youth was raw, violent, and scarred by trauma. He fled into the wild, left to survive or die on his own, swinging his blade at trees and rocks night after night. Musashi didn't train for fame. He trained because if he slipped up for a single second, this bloody era would swallow him whole. For Musashi, there was no line between training and survival. What about you? Your biggest obstacle today isn't a blade at your throat, it's the paralysis of comfort. Procrastination, laziness, the fear of failure. These are just the modern versions of the enemies Musashi faced on the battlefield. Every time you justify hitting snooze, every time you surrender to a phone notification, you are signing the death warrant of your own potential. The battle for your life has already begun. Not on some distant battlefield, but right now, in the moment you choose to put down your phone or keep letting the algorithms herd you into mediocrity. 13 years old, an age when other noble kids were still sheltering in the shade of a dojo, learning proper polite forms, Musashi stepped into his first life-or-death duel. His opponent was Arima Kihei, a grown, arrogant, battle-tested swordsman. Kihei looked at the ragged, unkempt kid in front of him with pure contempt. He expected an easy win to boost his own name. But he was wrong. He wasn't fighting a child, he was fighting a cornered wild animal. No steel sword, no proper stance. Musashi lunged with a crudely shaped wooden stick, unleashing pure ferocity. A lightning strike, the sickening crack of a shattering skull, and Kihei collapsed into a pool of blood. The fight was over in a flash. Standing over his opponent's twitching corpse, the 13-year-old boy realized a cold truth. On the battlefield, empty reputation and beautiful etiquette mean nothing. Only one thing matters: the living and the dead. But that youthful aggression was soon crushed by a reality 10,000 times harsher. In the year 1600, the Battle of Sekigahara exploded. Over 160,000 samurai tore into each other to decide the fate of Japan. Musashi was just an anonymous foot soldier fighting for the Western Army, and his side was utterly humiliated. There was no glory here, no victory songs. Only chaos, screams, and the heavy stench of blood mixed into thick mud. The Western Army was slaughtered. To stay alive, the young Musashi had to crawl through the brush, hiding under piles of rotting, stench-filled corpses to evade enemy scouts. Lying motionless among rotting flesh, listening to the hunting footsteps of death right beside his ear, Musashi tasted absolute terror and the raw humiliation of a loser for the very first time. It was the scar of this total collapse that fundamentally changed Musashi. He realized that raw muscle is completely worthless without a clear strategy and an unshakable mind. He was done fantasizing about the shallow glory of a typical samurai. Now look at yourself. You face a little pressure at work and instantly get discouraged. Life knocks you down, someone rejects you, or a project fails, and you immediately start throwing a pity party, drowning in self-pity. You're so afraid of the humiliation of failure that you escape your responsibilities through cheap pleasures. Look at the pile of corpses at Sekigahara and wake up. Even the future swordsman had to taste humiliating defeat to grow. Today's failure is not the end. It's a ruthless filter that weeds out the weak and keeps the real warriors. Do you choose to surrender to fate, or do you choose to rise from the ruins like Musashi? In the year 1612, the lonely island of Ganryu sits isolated among violent waves. This was the agreed-upon stage for the most legendary duel in Japanese swordsmanship. Musashi's opponent this time wasn't some mindless brute. It was Sasaki Kojiro, a prodigy of flawless technique, terrifying speed, and an oversized nodachi longsword. Kojiro was famous for his swallow cut, a strike so blindingly fast and lethal that rumor said no living thing could escape it. Everyone thought this was the end of the line for the wanderer Musashi's undefeated streak. But he didn't play by anyone else's rules. He made his own. The appointed hour came. The sun rose higher. Kojiro stood on the sand, hand gripping his hilt. 1 hour passed. Still no sign of Musashi. Between the sweltering heat and the crashing waves, Kojiro's confidence began to crack. In its place came impatience, irritation, and finally a rage that burned through his logic. This wasn't Musashi being undisciplined, it was a cold psychological strike. He arrived late on purpose to shatter his opponent's patience and inner stillness. While Kojiro was fuming internally, Musashi was sitting on a small boat drifting toward the island, carving. He hadn't packed a polished masterwork blade. Using a small knife, he quietly shaved an old wooden oar into a rough, crude weapon. Why a wooden oar? Because Musashi had calculated the exact length of Kojiro's sword. He needed a longer weapon to give him the reach advantage. Screw appearances, screw elegance. Practicality and efficiency, that was all Musashi cared about. The moment the boat hit the shore, Kojiro charged, his face flushed with rage. He drew his prized blade and threw the scabbard into the surf. Musashi looked his enemy dead in the eye and said coldly, "Kojiro, you've already lost. If you thought you were going to win, you wouldn't have thrown away your scabbard." A single sentence, snapping the prodigy's last thread of composure. Kojiro swung, a wind-splitting strike aimed straight for Musashi's head. But a fraction of a second faster, Musashi's wooden oar came down with explosive force. Crack, the dry sound of a fracturing skull shattered the air. Kojiro collapsed, blood pooling into the sand. The duel was over in one single strike. This victory was decided in the mind long before the blades ever crossed. Musashi didn't just outskill Kojiro. He outmaneuvered him by controlling the environment, the timing, and his opponent's emotions. Think about the pressure you face every day. A massive exam, a high-stakes presentation, or a risky business venture. Most of us fail because we let external circumstances dictate our emotions. You walk into the arena panicking, worrying about what people think, intimidated by how strong your competition looks. Learn from Musashi, don't just rush in like a mindless brute. Take a step back, assess the reality, find the exploit in the environment, and prep the right tool for the job, no matter how rough or unpolished it looks. The person who masters their own psychology under pressure wins before the game even starts. In the year 1645, inside the cold, damp cave of Reigando, a frail old man whose breath grows shallower by the day is quietly writing the final words of his life. The Book of 5 Rings. This isn't a book about flashy sword forms for exhibition. It's a brutal survival manual, forged from the blood of over 60 undefeated duels. Musashi breaks his philosophy into 5 books named after the 5 elements of nature. Let's dissect them and look at your life through these layers of strategy. The Book of Earth, the core and the trap of uselessness. Musashi wrote, "Do nothing that is of no use." Earth represents the ground, the most basic, raw, yet solid foundation. A skyscraper needs a foundation dug deep into the earth to pierce the sky. A swordsman who wants to survive a hail of arrows must master the absolute basics, the fundamental stances and strikes, day after day, year after year. Look at how you live. You're constantly hunting for hacks, shortcuts, and overnight success formulas. You buy get-rich-quick courses and scroll through superficial life-changing short videos, while completely abandoning your core habits. Let's face the ugly truth. You are wasting your life on useless things. Endless doom-scrolling, toxic relationships, daily gossip and drama. They are quietly rotting your roots. If you want to master your destiny, the first step of the Earth Book is to ruthlessly cut out the noise. Focus on the most foundational skills and practice them thousands of times until they become second nature. There are no shortcuts, only disciplined repetition. The Book of Water, invisible flexibility shapes victory. Water has no fixed shape. Pour it into a cup, it becomes the cup. Pour it into a bottle, it becomes the bottle. When a boulder blocks its path, water doesn't smash itself to pieces. It quietly builds up and flows around it. This is the lesson of the Water Book: fluid adaptability and dropping your ego. In modern life, most of us fail because we are too rigid. You cling to outdated mindsets, reject new tech, and panic when your plans fall apart. A swordsman who only knows one fixed strike will quickly end up a corpse when facing someone who can counter it. Today's world changes by the second. Algorithms shift, markets crash, jobs get automated. Instead of sitting around whining that life isn't going your way, be like water. Drop your ego, be ready to learn, and pivot your strategy instantly. The ultimate survivor isn't the strongest, it's the one who adapts the fastest. The Book of Fire, charging into pressure to forge character. Fire represents wild flames, conflict, danger, and peak pressure on the battlefield. Musashi doesn't teach us to run from conflict. He teaches us to charge straight into it and control it. A katana blade only becomes razor-sharp after being heated thousands of times in a blazing furnace and taking tens of thousands of brutal strikes under a sledgehammer. Humans are no different. You can't forge character in the soft, air-conditioned comfort of a lazy life. Are you afraid of pressure? Do you run away from difficult tasks because you're scared of exhaustion or criticism? That cowardice is turning you into a rusty, useless blade. When adversity hits, when deadlines pile up, when crushing failure surrounds you, that is not the time to cry. That is the fire of the Fire Book cooking your character. Stop praying for an easy life. Build a back strong enough to carry a heavy load instead. Step straight into the fire, and you will walk out an undefeated force. Moving past the scorching trials of fire, Musashi's blade stopped being just about technique. It pushed into the realm of pure perception and spirituality in the final 2 chapters of the book. The Book of Wind, seeing through everything to master the game. In Musashi's style, wind means style or school, representing external forces, opponents, and the environment. He spends this entire chapter dissecting the weaknesses of other martial arts schools. Musashi wrote, "If you do not understand your opponent, you can never truly consider yourself a master." He taught, from one thing know 10,000 things. When you deeply understand one discipline, you start seeing the underlying laws governing the entire world. Look at how you handle challenges in life. You only look at yourself, trapped in your own ego, viewing the world through a narrow lens. You launch a business without researching the competition. You enter a relationship wanting the other person to cater to your emotional whims. You are blind, and that's why you lose. If you want to win, apply the Wind Book. Drop your ego and sharpen your observation. Analyze your competition coldly. Understand human psychology, read behaviors, and spot the hidden trends driving society. When you know exactly what your opponent is thinking, what they fear, and how the environment is shifting, you control the game before the first strike is ever thrown. The Book of the Void, the state of no mind and ultimate freedom. Void is nothingness, the blank space, but it isn't an empty void. This is the absolute peak of Musashi's swordsmanship and philosophy. It is the state of mushin, no mind, or what modern psychology calls the flow state. On the battlefield, the second you start overthinking, which way should I swing, what if I lose? The enemy is too strong, is the exact second your head leaves your shoulders. Hesitation, even for a split second, is a death sentence. A true master lets their body and blade move on pure, honed instinct, completely silencing the noise of the conscious mind. Why do you always freeze before major decisions? Why do you lock up in front of a crowd? Because your mind is full of garbage, fear of failure, self-doubt, and insecure comparisons with strangers on social media. You are shackling yourself with overthinking. The Book of the Void teaches you to let go. Meditate, journal, clear the chaos out of your head. When your roots are deep enough, your adaptation fluid enough, your resilience fire-tested, and your situational awareness sharp, trust yourself completely. Shut off the judging, lazy, fearful voice in your head. Act instantly. Sharp, decisive, without a shadow of a doubt. That is the moment you become unstoppable. May 1645. Reigando cave is swallowed by darkness and bone-chilling cold. The ragged wanderer of yesteryear has now become a frail, white-haired old man, drawing his final breaths. His body is broken down by decades of harsh exposure and jagged battle scars, but his eyes are still sharp, fiercely unbroken. Just days before passing away, Musashi quietly sat down to write his final words. Not military tactics, not sword techniques. This was the Dokudo, the way of walking alone, 21 brutal principles on living a solitary, self-reliant life, detached from all worldly chains. He wrote, "Accept everything just the way it is. Do not seek pleasure for its own sake. Do not regret what you have done." Musashi died in absolute solitude, no property, no family, no superficial fame to shield him. But he died as an inherently free man. He didn't depend on anyone for validation. He defined his own existence through his blade and iron discipline. Look at us today. You live in a world packed with fake connection, yet you're emptier and lonelier than ever. You crave a like, a share, or a compliment from total strangers on social media just to feel valuable. You let your mood be dictated by algorithms, handing over your priceless focus to cheap entertainment. You're drowning in comfort, letting the fierce beast inside you be domesticated into a weak creature. Musashi's declaration of war from Reigando Cave still echoes across centuries, slamming directly into your weakness. Today is victory over yourself of yesterday. Tomorrow is your victory over lesser men. The real battle has never been against anyone else. The biggest, most ruthless enemy is staring right back at you in the mirror every single morning. It's the procrastination, the lack of discipline, the fear of reality. Do you choose to keep lying there, letting the algorithms herd you into mediocrity? Or do you choose to stand up, turn off the screen, face adversity, and start training to master your own destiny? If you dare to choose Musashi's path, the path of a true warrior, leave a single dot in the comments below as a commitment to yourself. Act now. Don't wait for tomorrow, because the way is in training.